Welcome to Asia East by North. I'm Grant Newsham. Each week, Asia East by North introduces a topic of current affairs interest in the Asia-Pacific region, particularly focusing on East and Northeast Asia. And we offer our own perspectives and analysis, ideally offering subjects and topics and ways of looking at them that you've not thought of. Now, this week's topic, China's drug war against the United States. Foreigners have been buying off, or at least renting, America's ruling class probably since the Republic was founded. In modern times, the Saudis, the Japanese, the South Koreans, and the Israelis, to name a few, have all managed to purchase influence. One might shrug it off as just the way things work. But suppose a country helps pour illicit drugs into America that kill tens of thousands of Americans a year. And suppose American elites do absolutely nothing about it. Now that is influence. The country? The People's Republic of China. The deluge started around 2013 and has picked up steadily since then, and the numbers are staggering. The US government reported that in 2020, 93,000 American residents died from drug overdose, the vast majority from fentanyl poisoning, and the fentanyl mostly originates in China, moving via Mexico and Mexican drug gangs into the United States. The Chinese have in recent times even gotten into the money laundering part of the business, helping launder drug gangs massive earnings. Now talk about a win-win, as the Chinese communists like to say. In 2019, over 37,000 Americans died from fentanyl overdoses. That's nearly 5 times the number of American troops killed in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. In 2017, 28,000 Americans died of overdoses involving fentanyl. In a 2018 meeting with President Donald Trump, Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged to restrict all fentanyl-like substances. Trump declared this was a game changer. Not surprisingly, the fentanyl and the drugs kept flowing. The COVID-19 lockdowns have helped bump up the already horrific death totals, yet even as the death toll mounts, U.S. business and financial titans never mention it. The think tanks are mostly silent. Academia can't be bothered. And on Capitol Hill, there's lots of bold talk about taking on the PRC, and it's bipartisan talk. But when it comes to fentanyl in China, one hears little. Even the Trump administration, which was the firmest yet in standing up to China, didn't make so much of the fentanyl issue, though Mr. Trump raised it directly with Xi, and others did try. One official suggested calling the fentanyl scourge the third opium war. The response from inside the Beltway was immediate and visceral. You can't say that. But when it comes to China, it seems like there's all sorts of things you can't say. Even now, the US media too often downplay or ignore the fentanyl bloodbath, seemingly afraid to mention the C word, China. American elites make plenty of excuses for why the Chinese government can't, or better said won't, stop the illicit drug flow. Some claim Chinese local governments, supposedly outside of Beijing's reach, are to blame. The locals, it's said, won't stop fentanyl production since they want tax revenues and employment, and are also thoroughly corrupt. Well, that's all true enough, but local officials are also frightened of being caught crossing Beijing. Thus, one readily concludes that the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, leadership has no objections to all of this. Others explain that the PRC government is in a legal bind, as fentanyl producers keep jiggering the formula to avoid the illegal list, and therefore the producers are always one step ahead of a government that just can't revise laws fast enough, try as it might. Now that's a nice excuse, but in China the law is what Xi Jinping and the Communist Party say it is, as even billionaire Jack Ma and any number of powerful and well-connected Chinese tycoons and officials have discovered the hard way. If Beijing wants to shut down fentanyl producers, the law is no obstacle. The fact the PRC doesn't ban fentanyl in its entirety, much less go after producers the way it goes after Muslim Uyghurs, Christians, Falun Gong, or Hong Kongers, once again suggests the CCP is glad America is awash in fentanyl. But maybe the Chinese cops have a different approach to policing that ties their hands. Not quite. The PRC police can do whatever they want. Disappear people, arrest starlets, kidnap billionaires and booksellers, take foreigners hostage and lock them up. No problem. The only restraints come from Zhongnanhai, the very top of the CCP. The biggest whopper of all, however, is the claim that Chinese authorities can't locate the illegal drug producers, China's a big place, don't you know? But the CCP is creating a surveillance state that even George Orwell couldn't have imagined. Deface a poster of President Xi, say draw a mustache on it, and see how long it takes to be arrested and imprisoned. Post on social media that Xi resembles Winnie the Pooh, and you'll have the Ministry of State security agents at your front door in minutes. And remember that when Trump told Xi to knock off the fentanyl flow back in 2018, Xi reportedly replied, "We don't have a drug problem in China." So that means Xi can control the drugs, and he's channeling them to his #1 rival and greatest enemy. Most things involving the Chinese communists just aren't that hard to figure out. Shifting the blame, PRC officials claim it's the Americans who deserve blame for the United States' drug problem. The Americans just need to stop taking drugs in the first place. But pimps and drug pushers have been using this excuse for years. Well, we're just giving the customers what they want. Now, admittedly, human nature is what it is. But that's why civilized societies punish the providers of dangerous substances and services and don't just sanction users for their irresponsible behavior. In some quarters, there is also a tendency to excuse Chinese non-cooperation as payback for the opium wars of the 19th century. A payback? The opium wars were 180 years ago. This is nothing more than an arsonist gloating while watching the fire trucks and ambulances heading to his latest fire to pick up the corpses. And it's no coincidence the fire is at the arsonist's hated neighbor's house. The carnage can't be overstated. Fentanyl is ravaging all parts of American society, even in good neighborhoods. And about half of the deaths attributed to fentanyl are young people of military age. As one former U.S. government official noted, this is the equivalent of removing 5 or 6 divisions of U.S. Army or Marines off the rolls every year. And don't forget the battlefield casualties who survive but can't function as productive members of society, and then there's the burden and expense of caring for them. One hears elites who should know better say the victims are just druggies and wouldn't have joined the military anyway. Now that's malicious and it's wrong. Young people have been misbehaving for centuries, and that includes many who join the US military. But a six-pack or a joint is one thing. A concoction that kills or permanently disables is quite another. From China's perspective, what's not to like? You're weakening your avowed enemy, which you plan to dominate by mid-century. And even better, the PRC makes a lot of money from the drug trade, and they make it in convertible currency. If you buy fentanyl, you pay in US dollars. But while China is ultimately to blame, it is America's own ruling class that refuses to do anything about it for fear of offending China. And track it all back, and you'll find Chinese money far more often than not. So maybe overlooking 93,000 dead countrymen in exchange for Chinese cash is easier when you think it's just deplorables or Neanderthals in flyover country who are dying. It can't be helped if these people are too stupid and lazy to learn coding, or to get a Wharton MBA when their jobs, livelihoods, and communities were shipped overseas, mostly to China, by America's political and business classes from 1990 onwards. So a message to President Biden. You have sworn to protect American citizens, not to ensure Wall Street and US industry can take advantage of Xi Jinping's umpteenth promise to open up. So do one or more of the following. First, suspend all Chinese financial institutions from the US dollar network. Start with the People's Bank of China. Second, immediately delist every Chinese company from the New York Stock Exchange and other exchanges. They should not have been listed in the first place. Third, revoke the green cards and visas and place liens on the properties and bank accounts of the top 500 Chinese Communist Party members, relatives in the US. China can stop pushing drugs into America. It just needs a reason to do so. But watching America's elites do nothing, and many of them calling for unrestricted engagement with the PRC, one concludes that the Chinese have indeed gotten their money's worth from America's ruling class. Just listen to the head of the US-China Business Council, or the CEOs of Boeing, or Nike, or Apple, if you don't believe me. Now here's an idea. Let's require prospective graduates from elite MBA and international relation programs, and congressional staffers, and maybe even congressmen and congresswomen themselves, to spend a couple weeks in an urban neighborhood, say in the so-called Rust Belt that's been hit by fentanyl, on top of the carnage caused by the pedigreed classes when industries and jobs were shipped off to China. Well, maybe try Youngstown, Ohio, Uniontown, Pennsylvania, East Cleveland, or Buffalo, New York, or Baltimore, if you need some idea. Put them up in a local motel and require them to be outside on the streets from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., just soaking in the atmosphere. And maybe for a break, they can accompany the EMTs out on drug overdose calls and stop off at the local high schools and sit in with the guidance counselors just to get a sense of things and the bright futures too many of these kids face. Is this likely to happen? No. One gets the impression America's best and brightest just don't care. They should.